All right, World History 1 people, we are back in our discussions on the ancient civilizations. Today, we are taking a look at the ancient Hebrews. So, what you can tell by looking at this slide right here with the maps is that these are the people of ancient Israel and Judah. This is, modern day Israel today. So, yeah, we're looking at this group here. So let's go ahead and get into it. And here are some of our characteristics of ancient Israel. So around 3,200 years ago, we're going to start seeing the Hebrew tribes start to settle in Canaan, which is the old name for Israel. We're going to see, you know, in our discussion today, the Saul, the first king of Israel, the rise of the kingdom into prominence, David from the David and Goliath story, King Solomon, who was perhaps one of the wisest kings of the ancient world. The Temple of Jerusalem will get talked about a little bit. Uh, the Assyrians getting involved with Israel's history. Babylonia is going to get involved, King Nebuchadnezzar. We're going to see a lot of things happen and evolve in this particular region. So, the geography of, Israel is that it is the land between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River Valley. So, the Jordan River is that river that runs from the Sea of Galilee, this little blue dot right here, down to the Dead Sea. And so it's this narrow strip of land right here on the east coast of the Mediterranean. Now, it is a part of the Fertile Crescent. It is that it arcs up there to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It is that western part of the arc of the crescent. And today, of course, we know this is modern day Israel. And, there's the whole Palestinian thing going on there too. So, moving forward, we're just going to take a look at the ancient history. So, the Hebrew people really get their start with this guy, Abraham. For those of you who know your religious texts, you know that Abraham is like the father of Judaism, and by way of other descendants, he is also technically the father of Christianity and of Islam. So yeah, the three big ones trace their lineages back to Abraham. That's why it's called Father Abraham. All the great monotheistic religions all go back to him. So Abraham, he was a herder, like sheep herder type of guy, who lived in Mesopotamia in the city of Ur. That would have been like the southeastern area that goes down to like the Arabian Sea. And he basically is going to leave Ur to settle in Canaan by the command of God. And the Israelites believe that there was an agreement between God and Abraham, and so they become followers of Abraham, and that is how the people of Israel come into existence, essentially. Now, Isaac, who's one of the sons of Abraham, marries this woman Rebecca. They have twin sons, Jacob and Esau. You should remember that from your Bible stories. Uh, Jacob is going to trick his father by wearing like a sheepskin type of thing, because Esau was actually quite a hairy person. So he wears a animal skin to make him feel as if he is like Esau, like all hairy, because their father had gone blind at this point. And Jacob is going to flee because he feels guilty about what he did, and there's all like different things like that. Now, Jacob, he's going to run away, and he's going to have a bunch of children with two different women, and they are going to be basically the founders of the 12 tribes of Israel, all of his different sons that he's going to have. They're going to, because there are 12 tribes in Israel. So 12 different groups within the Hebrew people. And they all trace their lineage back to Jacob and then eventually back to Abraham and all of that for the founding of Judaism. Now, these 12 tribes, they pretty much, there is basically a story that there will always be 12 tribes of Israel. There's a lot of representation in a lot of Jewish art of the number 12, tracing back to the 12 tribes. So it's a pretty big deal when you're talking about that for Judaism. Now, Jacob has one son named Joseph, and he is the one who goes to Egypt. He's sold into slavery by his brothers. He ends up working as an assistant to a governor, and he's thrown in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and he is brought before the Pharaoh to be judged on this, and he ends up becoming a royal advisor, a royal vizier, second in command to the Pharaoh, one of the most powerful people in Egypt. And he is going to be reunited with his family, and his entire family moves to Egypt. Eventually, over time, more and more Jewish people are being brought to, Hebrews are being brought to Egypt, where they're essentially put into bondage, into slavery, and are forced to work for the Egyptians, doing a lot of building projects. And they were forced to do all of this hard manual labor as slaves because the Egyptian people feared that the Hebrews would eventually outnumber them and take over. So, what's the best way to stop that? By oppressing them. So then we get the whole story of Moses. Everybody pretty much should know the basics of this. Moses was born into slavery. His mother, to save his life, sent him downriver in a basket. He's found by the Egyptian royal family and adopted as a son. He grows up to become a prince of Egypt, and he is going to flee to Ethiopia because he accidentally kills a Egyptian overseer who was beating a Hebrew slave. So during his exile into Ethiopia, he becomes a Jew, and he is going to return to Egypt to work on freeing the slaves and bringing the people out of Egypt. So when we're going to see like all the plagues because of the Pharaoh not allowing the Jews to leave. And that's how we're going to get, the frogs, the pestilence, the diseases. We're going to see locusts. We're going to see, the slaying of the firstborn, a lot of terrible things. And it's going to eventually lead to the Pharaoh allowing Moses to lead the Jews out of Egypt, and they, go on their way trying to get back to Canaan, their homeland. And that is where we get the Exodus. When the Jews reach the Red Sea, on their way out of there, they're going to cross. If you see on the map, here is Egypt, here is the Sinai Peninsula, and up here is Canaan, where modern day Israel is today. They're going to cross the Red Sea, and it's supposed to have been through some divine intervention that they're able to that Moses can part the Red Sea. The Hebrews flee through the divided water along the bottom of the sea because it's exposed now. And the Egyptians, who have now gone back on their word for allowing them to leave, are chasing after them, and the water is closed in on them, drowning a whole bunch of them. And yeah, that's pretty much how that story goes. So during their wandering over the next number of months and years, the Ten Commandments are delivered to Moses by God, and you get this basic set of laws that are given to the Hebrew people. 1, believe in God. 2, do not worship any God except God. 3, don't take the Lord's name in vain. 4, observe the Sabbath. So like respect the holy day of the week where you're not supposed to work, honor your parents, do not murder. I know it says thou shalt not kill, but it's actually implying do not murder because sometimes you have to kill in self-defense. There's a gray area there. Do not commit adultery, so don't cheat. No stealing, don't lie, and also don't be jealous of the things that someone else has. So those are the laws that the Hebrew people are going to live by, or do their best to live by. All right, so moving forward, we're going to see the rise of Saul. He's the first king of Israel. And after Saul, we get David, the whole David and Goliath story. He's going to rise from being a shepherd to becoming a king in Israel. And that, of course, is going to lead to stuff dealing with Jesus Christ, who is actually a descendant blood-wise from David. Then we get the third of our big three kings of Israel, Solomon. Now, he would build the Temple of Jerusalem, and it is supposed to be one of the greatest temples that was ever built, like in the ancient world. Solomon was said to be one of the wisest men in all of human history. And like the classic story that tells us this is the story of the two women fighting over whose child a baby is. So to settle the dispute, these women are brought to King Solomon, and they're each saying like, hey, the baby's mine. And so he's just like, you know what we'll do? We'll cut the baby in half. That way you each have a baby. And one woman says, yeah, okay, that seems fair. And the other one's like, no, 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 just let her have the baby. That second woman ends up getting the kid because the real mother would rather not have her child and have it live with someone else than have it dead. And the woman who said like, yeah, that's fine, cut it in half, she went to prison for, lying and trying to basically steal a baby. So yeah, pretty crafty the way that he settled that dispute. And that's just one of many, many, many examples that you can find about King Solomon. Now, after the time of the big three kings of Saul, David, and Solomon, we're going to see some things start to go very wrong for the Hebrews. The prophet Jeremiah is going to basically give some foretelling of the fall of Israel. 597 BCE, we're going to see Nebuchadnezzar II capture the city of Jerusalem for the Babylonian kingdom, the Babylonian Empire, that we talked about in a previous lesson. The Jews are going to be deported from Israel to Babylonia. So they're being moved from their homes here on the coast of the Mediterranean, and they're being trekked up and down the Euphrates River to Babylonia. So they're being moved hundreds and hundreds of miles. And the Temple of Solomon is going to be destroyed because of his attack on Jerusalem, and we're going to just see the people just being exiled and brought out. So yeah, not exactly a great situation. And we're also going to see some time later, because that is 587 when that all is pretty much wrapping up, roughly 650 years later, we're going to see the diaspora. Now, the diaspora is when the Jewish people are leaving the Middle East and spreading out into new areas. So we're going to see them spreading across North Africa, as we see here, going up into other parts of the Middle East, and then, of course, going up into Europe, where where they settle is typically in urban areas, not a whole lot of rural communities of Jewish people during the medieval period and later ancient period. Typically, they're going to settle in cities and large towns. All right. So, a couple of facts about Judaism, the religion of the Hebrew people. They are the first major world religion that is monotheistic, worshiping one God. The founder is Abraham. The lawgiver is Moses, because the Ten Commandments. Their holy book, how like Christians have the Bible, the Jewish people have the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, they are the books of Moses. The name of God is Yahweh. The holiest city in Judaism is Jerusalem, and the location for Judaism, ancestrally is the Middle East in Israel. All right, so those are a lot of your key facts right there. That is where we are ending today. When we come back next time, we will be taking a look at the Phoenicians and the people of Nubia. All right, so that is where we're ending, and I will see you next time.